my team going. Just to preface my statements, I'm totally sold on BIM. But every time I hear a demonstration from Bentley Graphisoft and ArcCAD, it's all being talked up. And I think we saw an instance there at the conference in Dundee whereby they abandoned BIM and the Titanic project in Belfast. And I'd love to see maybe a seminar or something on what BIM can't do. It's not entirely a mature product, but I think it would be helpful. We have found that there's a huge number of ways that, for instance, when you go to design a unique building, there are elements that it's fine out of the box. The program is very, very fast for conventional work. But when you go to specialist elements of a project, it can be difficult to model them in BIM. And I'd love to see somebody coming up here and maybe having a chat about how best to overcome these kind of specialist issues that arise, when one tackles a major project in BIM. And I think it would help to convince the doubters more about taking BIM on board as a solution, for their practices. But it isn't. It can be difficult to model elements of buildings. We have found that quite a lot. Complex elements. You have to go into 3D modelers and so on and so forth, and it increases file sizes and what have you. So we're just talking about the good things about it. It might be no harm to have a seminar on really the not so good things.
Yes.
Finally, then. A point Ralph made about the RIAI and BIM, I think there are people that are going to have to be tackled aggressively and to convince them of the benefits, because I'd say of all of the stakeholders, they're probably the slowest group of all to be convinced that this is a way forward for building documents, documentation, or producing conclusion.
I think part of the problem is the principle design practices, whether they're architects or engineers, are typically out of touch with technology. They're dealing at a higher level, and most of them aren't even touching a computer. And I don't know where they're getting their information from about what technology their practice should be implementing. It's a bit sad. I think this alliance is fantastic. There's very little representation of the professional institutes in this room.
Just to finish up there, we're currently seeking RIAI accreditation for our architecture technology courses. And one of the biggest criticisms our panel of architects made to us is that we're not using butter paper for sketching. And that is the truth. And we had a fairly decent exhibition of work students did at BIM. And yet that was one of the leading criticisms of the group, that we have to go back to the drawing board, but kind of forget about SketchUp, go back and start using butter paper and tracing paper and sketching. Now we do realise the benefits of sketching, but we're not going there. But it just supports Ralph's point about the RIAI.
How many practices are still drawing by hand, T-squares and set squares and drawing boards? BIM is game changing. Whether you implement it as little BIM or big BIM, as it's called out there, as a practice, you implement little BIM. Forget about the big BIM for now. Realise the obvious savings that are there that Ralph has identified. Your staff can become more productive. They can produce drawings faster. Stuff is coordinated. Changes can be made and will ripple throughout the entire model itself. It's like going from paper drawing or hand drawing to CAD. I mean, we moved from paper-based drawings in the 80s and 90s in the teeth of recession to now, where we're in the teeth of recession again. And it's game changing. The move is happening, whether you get involved now or down the line. It's inevitable.
Sorry, just one observation. What interests me most is the amount of effort that's been spent to convince people to take a place in the lifeboat. In my opinion, progressive firms will adopt BIM and technologies to make them more efficient, and the regressive firms won't. The result of that will be in a couple of years' time, the regressive firms will be eliminated and become extinct. And on that basis, I just find it interesting that people are spending so much time to sell something to those who have a regressive approach to technology, when it's the technology itself that will save them. and the use of it in an efficient way, in an isolated way. For example, if an individual practice operating on its own through using newer technology can reduce their costs, they will beat their opposition. It's just that simple. So if they can't see that, let them go. In a couple of years' time, we will be left with progressive firms. It's just that simple.
Although, I mean, there is a role for the higher buy-in for the institutes, because if we're going to take them further, and I think that's where it needs to go. I thought it's great if you get the internal gain, but the vision of integrated project delivery, working with your consultants and your contractor in an integrated way is fantastic, would be fantastic. But I think for that to happen, we're going to have to get the Construction Industry Council, the RIR, the Engineers Council, the Chartered Surveyors, to agree. We'll have to develop forms of contract that allow that to happen. And without the sort of high-level buy-in of that council, we're not going to get those forms of contract agreed. So, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, progressive firms will progress, but we need to work from the top down as well.
But for individual firms take up the technology and they basically use it and become efficient and survive, then effectively they will be able to cooperate and collaborate with other firms in the future who have taken the same steps in their individual professions. And as a consequence, that will determine the collaboration between firms and discipline in the future.
But sorry, there is the element, you've got to get all, you can go in isolation and that's fine, and you can say, great, we're getting a return of 20%, 30%, but you've got to get the other disciplines involved in it. And as Ralph said, you probably need it not from the top down, but you've got to get them aware of what's going on and support it. And if they don't do that, well then, a couple of firms that are progressive will kind of make a stuttered approach and get certain out, but then they'd have to pull the information back because the other disciplines haven't bought into it, and it's all a bit messy, and some will kind of rise up and some won't. But if it was a collective approach, well then collectively we'll all rise up.
Well, the other way of looking at that is that those that are opposed to technology will always drag back those that are not. If you wait long enough, there won't be.
Correct. Well, I think the thing that's been holding back for so long as well has been 2D. This BIM isn't that new, although we're talking about it much more of late. BIM has been around, the modelling, 3D modelling has been around, but there's been a resistance to that for so long. But slowly it's getting there. But it needs to be quicker, or else it's too late.
Also, I'd just like to come back to another point Rolf made is the issue of the contracts, and I think with the RII, it has a background of working in the REBA system, whereas in America they've been a lot more used to design build strategies, and I know that the RII is it's not resistant to it, but there are differences. And I think if maybe an analysis could be made between what is IPD as opposed to design build, there are those advantages can also be made more clear. And I think there would be more of a willingness to buy into IPD as opposed to what is seen by architects as losing their status as an agent and things like that. Which is what happens in design build scenarios.
For me as an architect, I would say that's the very reason why we should be getting on board and taking a lead, because it's gonna, as you say, BIM is gonna happen, and if the professions don't take a lead, they're basically going to be told what to do eventually. But I've already heard of projects. I've already heard of projects where the design team are basically told you will be doing the project in this format, whether you like it or not. So,
maybe one of the final questions, just the tea coffee outside, and we need to vacate the room soon. So, any other questions? Yes.
I'm not from a design background myself, but the technology seems obvious enough. You can do the ROI on it, and you can get the return on investment, etc. The big unknown seems to be the training, and that seems to be a barrier. You can invest in how much the software is going to cost. You can calculate how many projects you work on. You can calculate what the savings should be. Is that a barrier? How do managers or owners of architecture firms kind of go, right, don't want to touch it because we don't know what it's going to take to upskill our staff to be able to use BIM. Is that an issue? Do you find it easy to upskill staff, or is there an issue around is it easier to kind of train kind of graduates out of college in the last 3 or 4 years, or is it difficult to kind of train people that have been in the industry for 20 years, or that is a hazy part. That's
We actually had a meeting yesterday with the CITA steering group, and it became obvious from the people within the sector on the steering group that really it's as needs basis that they train their staff. Legislative type training where they have to comply with various regulations, and health and safety seems to be obviously the top one. IT is not a priority for them right now, the way things are. And if staff do want to train in IT, they do it out of their own costs. So that's a huge problem at the moment.
Training seems the cost as opposed to a cost
That's-
benefit.
That's out there, but we're entering into a new program. We'll be negotiating hopefully with Skillnet. We actually got a compliant visit today with Skillnet. We're pretty searching in what they're looking for, but we'll be negotiating with Skillnet for a new contract next year. So hopefully we'll try to get greater subsidies for people to train, greater incentives, reach out maybe more so to the unemployed and so on. So we're doing everything we can, but I think there are, until the Irish government, who that will be, we don't know, until this Irish government comes in and we get a Minister of Communications or a Minister of the Environment who listens to his Scandinavian counterparts and is persuaded by the use of these tools and how it can bring benefits to public sector projects. Until we can crack that nut, it's going to be a struggle, But so
I think even in the best of times, design firms weren't investing heavily in training. We were architecture practice for 10 years, and I think we were sent on any training courses.
I'm too busy to train.
It seems the cost as opposed to kind of a
okay,
And again, maybe it's because the principles of those practices don't understand the benefits of it.
I'm sure there'll be another forum to discuss this. Again, thank you to John and Jared for 2 excellent presentations, to all the vendors who supported us since June of this year in this series of BIM. We're all hoping to get along to the 26th of November at the Grand Canal Theatre. We're still fine-tuning the programme. We hope to have a message from top architects, senior engineers, public sector people, ministers, maybe on screen on the day, talking about BIM and how it's important to them. We will be looking to talk to the members over the next month or so, or 6 weeks, to plan the events for next year. And I think, Ralph, we'll just call a meeting as maybe prior to the November date. And we have obviously the webinar next Thursday. So I think we'll get a momentum going, and we'll be back talking about this for many years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you.